All right, hello everybody. I am going to wait for a couple more minutes for people to come in. In the meantime, if you have not signed in for Digital District Day and you only have to do this once for the entire day, you can sign in now either using the QR code or bit.ly/DOT welcome, all lowercase. And for the attendees who are here, is there anyone who is hard of hearing or deaf or needs ASL interpretation? And are there any ASL interpreters here who need to be made co-host? All right, hello, this is mic check again. We are just waiting for a couple minutes for people to join in. And again, if you have not signed in already for Digital District Day and you only need to do this once, you can sign in with that QR code on the screen. All right, hello everyone. We are going to begin now. I don't believe there are any ASL interpreters here or hard of hearing or deaf participants, but if you are, please let us know at any time and we will make you co-host so that you can do your thing. Right now, chat for participants. The panelists and co-hosts can see your chats, and I will enable chat to everyone later on in the presentation when there will be some like group work. So again, if you have not yet signed into Digital District Day, if you could please do so, there is the QR code that you can use right now, or you can use the link bit.ly/.welcome. And you only need to do this once for the whole day. All right, so welcome to making your website accessible for people with disabilities. My name is Joyce Tsai. I am with the communications department at SFUSD. And my co-host is Ralph Reclusado, who works with me on the SFUSD website. He's also posted a link to the slide deck in the chat. So while we're getting started, I believe you all already are on mute actually, and your camera is already off, so you don't need to worry about those. We do have live transcription on, so you can turn that on at any time. Hi all, sorry about the troubleshooting. Thanks for letting me know about the thing on the top of the slide. Hopefully that is now working. Again, live transcription is on. If you want to view the live transcript, you can go to the bottom of Zoom and there should be that CC icon labeled live transcript. If you click that and select show subtitle, you'll be able to see the transcript. And as a note, as with the rest of the Digital District Day sessions, this session is being recorded. All right, so today's agenda, we have our welcome, which we did. I'm going to do a quick introduction to accessibility, especially around websites. We're going to talk about designing for users with visual impairments, designing for users who are deaf or hard of hearing, and designing for users with cognitive impairments. And some of our SFUSD norms are basically keeping equity at the center for both students and adults, being a part of the solution and being present. So designing for users with disabilities. That's basically what accessibility is. As a public institution, SFUSD is committed to ensuring that people with disabilities have an equal opportunity to participate in all of our programs, benefits, and services. So I'm going to play this video on web accessibility quickly. There is a transcript also available. And I will paste the link to the transcript in the chat if anyone needs that.
Do you want your visitors to browse your website like this? Or do you want to watch this video? Or if I told you that in order to check out, you have to pick the green button, could you? Not without being frustrated. And this is why I'm going to tell you about the importance of web accessibility in 1 minute. So what is web accessibility? It's the idea that technology must be equally accessible for people with and without disabilities, and that any barriers to accessing the web are removed. High five, Sir TBL. Who are we helping when we make our sites accessible? Visitors with visual disabilities, such as low vision or colorblindness. Auditory disabilities, such as deafness. Cognitive and neurological disabilities, which can include visitors with learning disabilities or people affected by seizures. And physical and motor disabilities, such as repetitive stress injury or muscular dystrophy. Not to mention, it can also enhance various other experiences, like visitors on a slow internet connection. But how do we make our sites accessible? Luckily, we have established standards to follow. These best practices show us the importance of having semantic heading structures, to ensuring proper color contrast, to providing text alternatives for video content. Now that you're ready to start making your website accessible, start digging in by checking out the Lighthouse Audit and Chrome DevTools to see where you can start improving your site. And then check out a web accessibility workshop at your local Girl Develop It chapter. Thanks for joining the journey to make the web a better place for everyone.
All right, everyone, apologies if you could not hear the video. There is a transcript as well if you need. Anyway, why accessibility? So it is crucial to SFUSD's goal of access and equity and to our core values of social justice and being diversity driven. Not only that, we legally have an obligation to ensure that the civil rights of individuals with disabilities are met under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Not only that, we are under a voluntary consent decree with the Office of Civil Rights of the Department of Education to ensure that all newly added or modified online content on SFUSD is accessible for people with disabilities. So those are the legal reasons, but honestly, we want to make sure that everything is accessible to everyone because everyone matters and we want to make that felt. If you are a website content owner, so if you have Drupal access and can post things onto our website, sfusd.edu, all of our content managers have to take the course on accessibility. So this counts. People who can't publish to the website do not need to take the course, but are highly encouraged to. I find this information just really useful all around. So we really want to build an inclusive online environment. All right, I have another video here and I will try turning up the volume. If that does not work, there is also a transcript. And thank you, Ralph, for posting that as well. So we're gonna watch this and then I will enable chat for everyone to kind of do a share.
I lost my vision when I was about 7 years old.
I could see until I was 15.
When you're that young, you tend to adjust more quickly to being blind.
Communication is so important to what I do. Without it, I would not have a job. The technology to create an accessible document, an accessible PDF is there. Now the challenge is educating people to the fact that if you create something one way, it doesn't work well. If it's created another way, then it works great.
Now, I do use JAWS all day long on my job. If you could send me a Word document or a document that does not have a whole lot of graphic material in it, that would be awesome. And if you could format it, and if there's headings, that's wonderful, because receiving documents that aren't accessible, that can drive me nuts.
Imagine that you can only do something when I say you can do it, because I'm the person that has to either do this for you or give you the tools to do it. Maybe you want to go to the grocery store. Oh no, you can't go to the grocery store unless I say you can go to the grocery store.
I feel very strongly when I get a document and I can't read it, the same way a sighted person will feel strongly about receiving a document that wasn't written properly or was scribbled or whatever.
Creating an accessible document is not a horrendous process, and that it can be done and done fairly easily, then I think this helps everybody.
I think we just have to remind people that when they are doing documents, that they're not just doing these documents for sighted people, but they're also doing these documents for people who use screen reading software to access them. And keep in mind too that it's not just for the professionals, but also think in terms of our students. When our students out there that are still like in elementary, middle school, and high school, and they need to be able to go out on the internet and do their research and that kind of thing. And if that web page isn't accessible or set up the correct way, then that's going to cause frustration. So if I'm frustrated as a professional adult, you can imagine what that does to someone that's in the 6th grade.
I think you're guiding them towards an idea that things are not accessible and that why should I waste my time? And I believe that that is going to diminish their ability to be a good student. And you are pointing out the fact to everybody, all the other students in the class, that Scott can't do this. And so it not only affects me because I can't do it, but it tells the other people in the class that I can't do things that they can do. So I think it's twofold. Now you are I get frustrated because I can't do it, but it reinforces the idea on the other students that people with disabilities can't do things.
All right, I've enabled chat for everyone right now. So after watching this, if you could just post in the chat window, like what did you learn or feel or experience after watching this video? And you may need to turn chat so that it's to everyone and not just the host of panelists. Thank you, people who are commenting. We have someone who's excited to learn what tools are available, so all have access. Someone who's excited about the importance of accessibility. Have empathizing with the frustration with not being able to access materials. Does anyone else have comments you'd like to post? Great, thank you, Susan. All right, so just moving on. The first thing we're going to address is visual impairments and how to make the website accessible to people with visual impairments. This is mainly where the emphasis of accessibility is on, primarily because the website tends to be a very visual experience. So many visually impaired people use a tool called a screen reader to browse the internet. So a screen reader basically acts kind of as like an audiobook for the internet. If you guys have ebooks where you've enabled like audio reading, that is basically like a screen reader. It goes through all the content of a website and web page and just reads aloud everything there. That said, there are some very specific things that we can do to make sure that screen readers work as well as possible so that people who use them get the most out of them. So we have another video just to demonstrate how screen readers work. I can kind of describe it, but it's much easier understanding if you can kind of see it.
Hi, my name is Jason Holt. I'm with the Universal Access Department. Today, we will be demonstrating a screen reader. With a screen reader, I, as a blind person, can navigate to a web page, and I don't use a mouse because I can't see where the mouse is pointing, but I can use a keyboard, and JAWS, the screen reader, will tell me where I am on the page and allow me to read various parts of the page. Okay, let's take a few minutes to actually see how JAWS works. Here we are at my main screen on my computer, and I want to browse the internet, so I will open up a browser. I'll press the Windows key.
Menu, search box, edit, type text in this edit field or press up or down arrow.
And JAWS announced that I have a menu. Then I want to find my browser. My favorite browser is Firefox.
JAWS 17.0, one of Internet Explorer submit, Word 2013 submit, Firefox submenu 406.
Oh, Firefox, that's the one I want, so I'll press enter.
Enter, leaving menus, Firefox, Mozilla Firefox, start page dash Mozilla Firefox, search clear.
That opens the browser. Now I'll press Alt-D to put my cursor in the navigation bar.
Alt-D, navigation toolbar, search.
Now let's go to our homepage, the community college's homepage. So I'll type SLCC
period, E-D-U.
EDU. You notice that JAWS repeats to me each character as I type it. That way if I make a mistake, I can hear it and I can backspace.
Slash, U, HTTP, /.
And I can retype it again.
U, search or enter address edit combo, SLCC.
Now I'll press enter.
SLCC dash Mozilla Firefox, page has 3 regions, 8 headings and 68 links. SLCC.
Oh, it says SLCC. It sounds like I'm on the right page. Okay, here we are on our home page, and I want to go to the accessibility page, the college's accessibility page. I don't know where that is on this screen, so I'll do a search.
Virtual find, JAWS find dialog, find one colon edit
I'm searching for accessibility.
A-C-C-E-S-S-I-P-L-I-T-Y. Enter. Visited link accessibility.
Oh, it tells me I'm now on the link that says accessibility. That's what I want. So I'll press enter on that link.
Enter. Accessibility visited link. Vertical bar SLCC-Mozilla Firefox. Vertical bar SLCC list. Page has 3 regions, 1 heading and 69 links. List of 2 items link SLCC/accessibility.
Okay, I'm on the accessibility page. If I press H, which lets me jump from header to header,
Accessibility heading level 1.
heading, I'm sorry, not header. Oh, I'm at the accessibility heading. Let's read what it says under that.
List of 7 items.
Oh, there's a list of items.
Visited link home. Link
Home.
web accessibility.
Accessibility.
Link web accessibility.
Web accessibility.
Link purchasing.
Purchasing.
Link web accessibility. Link accessible documents.
Accessible documents.
Link types of disabilities.
Types of disability.
Visited link captioning.
Captioning.
List end.
Now let's hear what the text says underneath the heading.
Web accessibility means that people with disabilities can use the web. More specifically, web accessibility means that people with disabilities can perceive, understand, navigate, and interact with the web, and that they can contribute to the web.
One thing you should know is that having a screen reader by itself does not make the internet accessible to me. If you look at our homepage, and as I navigate through it,
SLCC.
you'll find that there are headings
Summer classes heading level 2.
and
Content information.
regions which the designers have made some effort to put into the page that allow me to jump from section to section. So I don't have to
SLCC.
stop and explore every little link to find where I want to be. On some web pages where there might be almost 100 links, but yet there's no way to skip to the main part of this article that I want to read. So I have to skip from link to link to link and jump from section to section to find where I want to be, the main article. Sometimes it is frustrating, but after one has some experience with a screen reader, you learn some tricks.
All right, so that was a very quick demo on how a screen reader could work. There are many types of screen readers. So this using one called JAWS. There are different ones for different people. So I think I have enabled chat again for everyone. Feel free to post in the chat window, either to us or to everyone. So what struck you most about the experience of using a screen reader? Like, have you seen one before or used one before, and what did you think? Cool. So we have some people who've never seen or used one before. They are a little difficult to use, obviously, if you've never experienced one. One other thing that you may have noticed when the person was using the screen reader is that he was going through and browsing, not with his mouse, but with a keyboard. So you can also try to do that yourself. We also have some people who find the screen reader voice really jarring and really fast, which is true. And I think those of us who don't use screen readers regularly, it's very weird. That said, I think when you do use it more, people do tend to like the really fast voice, just because, as you can imagine, I'm sure there's like a lot of content on the website. And if the voice goes too slowly, it takes a lot of time to navigate things. Definitely agree that it's always frustrating to see pages that are just really poorly designed and make people who use screen readers just go through like hundreds of links before they get to the main content. So some of the things are things that need to be kind of programmed into the website beforehand, or like within the structure of the website. So if you note on sfusd.edu, if I tab You'll see how it highlights the different links. When you're on a new page on the website, there will also be a link when you tab from things to things that says skip to content. So those are things that like the website designer and the website programmer have to put in. There are a lot of things people who create the content can do to make website content more accessible. So one of these things is when you're using images, obviously the screen reader is not going to be able to tell what the image is automatically, at least not yet. I think some tech companies are working on AI that will do that, but I think that is still pretty early and not always accurate. So when you do post images online, one of the main things that's very helpful is using what we call alternative text or alt text. So this is basically just some text that will tell the screen reader what the content of the image is. So effective alt text, you want to be accurate and present like the same content and function that's presented by the image. So sometimes there are a lot of images on the website that don't really have that much purpose in terms of content. They're kind of there to spruce up the website and just provide some like visual differentiation for people who are sighted. If that's the case and the content in the image is not that important, I would not actually do very lengthy alt text because then the screen reader is actually going to read through all that alt text. So generally speaking, if you're using the images like decoratively or just kind of providing some context, try to keep your description to like a sentence or two, like maybe, student at desk reading a book or something. If the information is there in the text on the page, remember that the screen reader is going to read that text as well. So you don't need to provide that within the image itself. So for example, if your image has a caption, you don't actually need the same caption in the alt text of the image. The other thing is usually when screen readers read the alt text for an image, they'll usually preface it with like image or something like that, and then the alt text. So they may say something like image, student at desk reading a book. So you don't actually need to use phrases like photo of or graphic of to describe the image unless the format of the image itself is like very important. Another thing with images, if you can tell, the screen readers can't tell the content in an image, at least not yet. Similarly, if there is text in your image, the screen reader is not going to be able to read that text. Not only that, but Google Translate, which we have on the sfusd.edu website, Google Translate is not going to be able to translate that as well. So if you're not sure if your text is in an image or not, and you are on the SFUSD website, one way to test is you can always try to highlight the text. So for example, if you just use your mouse to highlight the text, usually that means the text is in text format, you can copy paste it, etc. If you can't highlight the text or copy paste it, the computer can't read the text. So even though it may look good within the image, generally we recommend taking the text out of the image and including it in the content so that people who use screen readers and people who use like the translation features on their website or browser can read the text. One other thing you can do is structure your content. So you may have noticed in the video when the person using the screen reader went to a web page, one of the first things that the screen reader did was say there are X number of links and 5 different regions on this page. So all of that is stuff that can be done on the website. So the regions on the page is something that needs to be done by the person who's kind of designed or put together the website. But things like links and headers are things that you can do yourself when you're creating the content for a website. So one of the main things you can do is use headers instead of bolding or resizing text. So maybe you've made your text like 5 times larger and it's bold, but if it's not actually like marked as a header or heading by the computer, like the computer is not going to actually know that it's a heading. Like it may look like one to you, but on the back end, it's not going to look like that to the screen reader. These instructions, I think, are pretty generalizable to things like Google Docs and the website. So if you edit things like tables, you can often select table properties and pick things as headers for like the first row or the first column. And that helps when people are navigating through a table. How can you tell if something's a header? So I have a sample Google Doc here, and I have several headers. So if you are using Google Docs, you can use this. Usually Word or website WYSIWYG editors often have the same formatting. So I'm sorry, the controls are probably still a little small, but here you'll see if I click on this parent organization's heading 1, it might be a little small here, but under the styles where it had said normal text before, now it says heading 1. So that means that it's marked as a heading for the computer. Similarly, if I click here for pack heading 2, you'll see up here in the drop down, it's changed to heading 2. Similarly, there's heading 3. And then if I click on the normal text, you can kind of see it's marked as normal text. So if you want to make something a header, you can always highlight the text, go to that drop down. Usually it'll say something like normal text or paragraph, and then you can choose a heading. As you may have been able to figure out by the numbers, heading 1 is usually the biggest heading, so that's usually like a page title. Heading 2 would be like a subheading, heading 3 would be under heading 2, and this basically generates something like an outline. So for Google Docs, you can kind of see an outline version of this. And similarly, this is what, excuse me, the screen reader is kind of going to see and be able to like say out loud, basically. This is really important because oftentimes instead of wanting to the screen reader to like read all the content on the page, someone is usually like looking for content. So one of the ways people who use screen readers browse for content is they'll tell the screen reader to just jump from header to header. So marking things as headers will really help with that. One other thing you can do is with your link text. So you may remember that when the person was using the screen reader and went to a new page, it said something about the headers, it said something about the different regions on the page, and it says something about the number of links on the page. So sometimes people who are navigating a page will try to jump from header to find content. Other times, especially if they're looking for content elsewhere, like they're on the main page of a website and they know the information isn't there, a lot of times what people will do is they will ask their screen reader to jump from link to link. So you may have noticed when the person was browsing through their website that the screen reader would read aloud the kind of names of the links. So it would say like visited link, SLCC homepage or something to let them know that they visited the link before. So when they do that, the screen reader is only reading the linked text. So because of that, you want to make sure that your link text, so that's the text that is like highlighted and linked, is helpful. Because if someone is jumping just from link to link, they are not going to hear all the surrounding text. So for the first sentence here, they may hear from the screen reader, link, Vision 2025, link, graduate profile. So that kind of tells them something about the content of the page. For the second one though, all they're gonna hear is like link, click here, link, click here. And that tells you pretty much nothing about what is at that link and doesn't help them decide if they want to go visit that link or not. Similarly, text like read more, learn more, or something very generic is not helpful. So when you are creating link text, like when you're highlighting text on something and creating that link, try to think, does this text make sense if that is the only thing someone is hearing? If it does make sense, great. If it sounds very generic, like here or click here, you may want to change that. One other thing, and this isn't specifically related to screen readers, but for people who are colorblind or have difficulty distinguishing between colors, when you are often designing things, try not to use color alone as a distinguishing factor. So what does that mean? So basically, if you took the color out, would the image or the presentation of the content still make sense? So there's a link here to the colorblind web page filter tool. So that lets you kind of put in a web page and just see what it might look like to someone who's colorblind. So you can always play around with that if you'd like. So you can always post something up here, like a link here, like and it will kind of show you what your page or content might look like to someone who is colorblind. And you can also even pick different types of colorblindness. So that's always pretty fun to look at. So for example, if you are using a chart or a graph, maybe you have one line colored blue and one line colored red, but for someone who can't really distinguish between blue and red, it's just going to look like two lines, and maybe one is slightly darker, but it's pretty hard to tell the difference here. But if you, like, this is not to say don't use color at all, because it is a very helpful tool. It's saying just don't use color alone. So here, if you're still using blue and red here in the chart, but you just changed the red line so that it's a dashed line. So people just doing a quick glance may still be able to see that it's blue or red. But for someone who can't distinguish between them, even in black and white, you can kind of still see the difference here much more clearly. Another way to think of it is like, if you're creating content and you have to print it out in black and white, is it still going to make sense? Another thing about using colors is that you want to make sure that the colors you use, especially between the text and the background, make sure that there's enough contrast for it to be legible. There are people with visual disabilities who have difficulty, who have like very low contrast vision. So unless like the difference between the colors is very great, they may have a very hard time reading it. So for the example here, I have some dark text on a dark background. I have some light text on a light background. Both of these are pretty hard to read. You'll notice tiny text is also hard to read. So if you're designing a document or a website, and if you're posting content to the SFUSD website, all the SFUSD colors have already been vetted to make sure that there is enough color contrast. But if you're designing your own, you can use a tool called a color contrast checker to make sure that your text is legible. So here you can kind of play around. You can select different foreground colors and different background colors. And then it will tell you here, does your text and background pass? So this is super hard to read. But if I make it white again, It is much easier to read and you can see it passing. The WCAG is basically a set of website guidelines. AA is a high standard and AAA is a higher standard. So we generally try to meet AAA. And you may notice that it has normal text and large text. So generally try to aim for the normal text against the background being legible. Contrast. All right, now for some deaf or hard of hearing tips. So one of the main things for this is making sure you have subtitles or captions or transcripts available for video or audio content. So this is much easier to do now with technology. YouTube lets you add subtitles or even use automatic captioning. Tools like Google Meet, Google Slides, and Zoom all do automatic live captioning. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than not having anything. And this doesn't just help people who are deaf or hard of hearing. It can really help like English learners or people who have their speakers turned off, or just people who have like difficulty distinguishing sounds. Maybe they're working in a noisy environment. Like I grew up in Taiwan and there were just subtitles on the TV all the time. My parents still watch pretty much everything with subtitles, especially in English, since they grew up speaking Chinese. And I turn on the subtitles on pretty much everything because I actually have a really hard time just telling what words are. Like I can hear it, but I can't necessarily like process the words. So having the subtitles or captions can be helpful to a really large range of people. And one of the final areas we can help out with is people with cognitive impairments. So one of these is making sure you format your content for readability. So one of the main things you can do is just keep text short and direct. So this helps a lot of people. So if you're tired, you may have noticed like reading a huge paragraph of content with really complicated sentences, it's like really hard to process. We know now that reading on screens strains people's eyes, so anything that is shorter is easier to read for pretty much everybody. Simple and jargon-free text is usually easier to read for people who don't primarily use English. And not only that, if you are using like machine translation, like Google Translate, to generate a translation, or even if you're just giving your text to like a human translator, the simpler the text is, the easier it is for them to translate. So keeping your text short and direct helps a lot of people. So there is a cool tool called Hemingway Editor that can help with this. I do notice that it does use a lot of color and it doesn't really give you a way to like get the meaning without the color, which is not great accessibility. But if you can use it, it is a pretty useful tool. So you can basically go into write mode and copy paste your text in here. And then when you go into edit, it will do things like highlight complex sentences. It will say if your sentence is really hard to read, it will say, hey, you can actually use a simpler word here. And you can kind of hover over and just use their suggested edits. So you don't have to go with this, but it is, I found, very helpful for like making your language as simple and short as possible. So that's one thing you can do when you're creating the text. The other thing you can do is just making sure you format the text. So just those huge paragraphs with long sentences are really hard to skim. So when you format your text for readability, try to like chunk out your content, use things like bullet points and lists, use the headers like we mentioned before. You can bold limited keywords. Obviously, if you bold everything, it's pretty much like bolding nothing. And also, you don't want to use all uppercase for emphasis. So obviously something like SFUSD would be in all uppercase, But generally, you don't want to use all uppercase if it's not for like an acronym. A, it tends to look like shouting on the internet, and B, it's much harder to scan because everything in uppercase is kind of like at the same height, as opposed to like lowercase letters where like there's more of like a difference in height and people can actually read that much more easily. So here is an example. Here is some Latin text. So even if you cannot read the text, like here, it kind of looks like a big text blob. But if you format it for readability, like in the second example, I still can't read the text because I don't know Latin, but you can kind of tell there is some important content that has been bolded. This list, so these 4 items probably have something to do with each other. So even if you like can't even read the text, formatting it can provide a lot of meaning in and of itself. And finally, generally, this is for the SFUSD website, but also for a lot of other things. Try to avoid using PDFs for content. They are not mobile friendly. You can't use something like Google Translate to translate them. If you are producing content for SFUSD, because of this, PDFs with essential information for families have to be translated into all the languages at the school. That's 15% or more of the school student population. Or if you're creating content for the entire district, it has to be translated into all of our essential languages. So that's Arabic, Chinese, Spanish, Tagalog, Vietnamese, and Samoan. The one benefit to PDFs is that they are printer friendly. That said, if you do need something that is printer friendly, I would highly recommend using a Google Doc instead. So the Google Docs are printer friendly. They're also more mobile friendly. You can resize them better on a phone. Like, I don't know if you've tried to open a PDF on the phone, but it's like you have to zoom in and zoom out, and it's just very difficult to read. Google Docs, so the person reading them cannot generate their own translation, but when you author a Google Doc, you can actually generate your own translation. So if I go to a Google Doc here and go to accessibility, there's a lot of options, or I think it's under tools. There is a tool called Translate Document. And you can always use that if you don't have like a human translator. We also highly recommend just making sure your content is posted to the website if possible. Our website is mobile friendly, and we do use Google Translate or custom translations. So if you are creating content for the district, we have additional translation guidelines as well. All right, so we have about 10 minutes left. I guess first, does anyone have any just general questions or wonderings that I can help out with or possibly try to answer? All right, and if you do, please feel free to just put it in chat at any time. So there's not going to be a ton of time for this activity, but if you want to try, we have an accessibility checklist. And I'm going to give you guys the time from now. So I have 10:52 on my clock to 10:55. So if you do have some digital content or a web page that you've created recently, try to take a look at that and take a look at the accessibility checklist to assess your content. So things you can think about are, what are some of the things you did well? Where might you be able to improve? And what's one thing you can do to ensure that your content's more accessible? So I'm going to let you guys try to find some digital or website content you've created and use the accessibility checklist on that until around 10:55. All right, so we're back and we are ending 5 minutes early to give you a chance to fill out various surveys. We did get a question about a quick demo of adding alt text on a Google site. I unfortunately don't actually have access to edit a Google site, but oftentimes what you can do is you can right click on the image and it will give you the option to add alt text. On our website, let's see. So it should work something like this. On our website, if you add an image, you can usually choose a file. And usually when you're doing something like that, they will ask for alternative text somewhere, or you can often right click on an image. All right, so that is the end of the session today. Thank you all for coming in. And thank you for people in DOT for helping develop content for our accessibility course. If you are a Drupal user, so if you do edit content for the SFUSD website and you want to get credit for taking the accessibility course, you can take this very quick quiz. We'll grade it and it will be on the record that you've taken this class. If you don't edit the SFUSD website, you can kind of just ignore this bit. And finally, we have this slide deck. There are a lot of links to the resources that I went through here. Here's our contact information. And finally, here is the Digital District Day feedback form. So please try to fill this out and it will help us improve this session for years to come. All right, so I will leave that up and let people fill that out.